Hey everyone, this is Karen Waksman, founder of Retail MBA, and I'm so excited to have Cameron Herold here. Hi, Cameron.
Hey Karen, how you doing? Good to see you.
Nice to see you. I'm so
Yeah.
excited that you're on this call, that you're with me today. So I've known Cameron for a long time, just kind of because he's part of all these different groups that I'm in. I think we first met at a Maverick business event. Are you in Mavericks? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I used to coach Yannick. Yannick was one of my I would call Yannick probably my first domino, that he was really the first big influencer that I met. And he and I met through Tim Ferriss, who was up at my home in Vancouver 14 years ago. Tim was staying at my place for the weekend with his brother, Tom, and we were hanging out for the weekend. And he mentioned Yannick. I'm like, I don't know who Yannick is. And Yannick and I happened to be in a business newspaper article the day before. We were in about a 3/4 page article in the Globe and Mail in Canada about these two guys that were running groups for entrepreneurs. And so Tim phoned Yannick on his cell phone and introduced me to Yannick that day. Yannick runs Maverick Business Adventures and Camp Maverick. And so I started coaching Yannick, and then Yannick introduced me to Joe Polish, and Yannick introduced me to Jason Gaynard. And it was like, boom, that became, I think, the big explosion of not my brand, because my brand was already big, but my network. Yannick introduced me to those groups. And then for me, it was the value of investing in myself, investment of going to those groups and always getting a 10x return. So yeah, we met at probably one of the Maverick events first.
You know, Yannick's part of this.
Yeah.
He's part of this event, and I love him
Yep.
dearly.
He's great. Yannick and I, again, like I coached Yannick for 7 years. I got to meet a lot of great people through Yannick. He's stayed at my home. We've hung together. Just a really wonderful human being. Love him a
If
lot.
you haven't seen the interview with Yannick Silver, you definitely want to do that. That's who we're
Right.
talking about. And so he's part of this event. So that's so cool. Okay, so yeah, so anyways, I run into you, and then you're part of Genius. You're part of all these different groups, and you just always have a good vibe. You always
Yep.
have a good vibe, and you're really all about helping. And you actually did some event, and you were talking about PR. And that's when I kind of understood, like sometimes you meet people, you don't know what they do, but you just like them, but then, you kind of get the details. You actually you want to talk about it, but essentially I think you were the CEO, right?
I've been the CEO of a couple of companies. Of 1-800
All right.
Got Junk.
1-800-GOT-JUNK. I guess I should have finished my sentence. 1-800-GOT-JUNK. You were part of the guys who were running that organization, and because of your efforts in marketing and all these things, the whole world knew about 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and it was through your PR efforts and all sorts of things. And so anyways, you got this company really, really famous, and if you haven't heard about that company, it's called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. You can look them up. But that's how you were explaining how you just went down and dirty and just did all these tactics to help the business move along. And it was through PR and sorts of things. And so I just wanted to have you come on, talk about some experiences, and let's talk about how to get the press to know about you, and anything else we want to talk about, because it's just so
Sure.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting. 1-800 Got Junk. I joined the company. It's now 20 years ago that I joined the company as their chief operating officer. I came in as the 14th employee. And when I left 6.5 years later, we had 3,100 employees system-wide. We had generated 5,200 stories about our company in the mass media,
Wow.
including being on Oprah. We were on Dr. Phil 17 times. We'd been covered in every major newspaper of the top 20 newspapers in the US. We were covered in all of them. We were on almost every major magazine in the print editions. And then we'd been on a lot of TV shows as well. So we really figured out the game of getting into the press, but I'd been doing it for 10 years before that as well. So I really learned how to get into the media in a house painting company that I helped build called College Pro Painters. And what we learned at 1-800 Got Junk was we didn't have the money in the early days for a marketing budget, but we did have the money to pick up the phone and call journalists and get them to talk about our story. So we really perfected the art of helping the media come up with new content and positioning ourselves for that content.
It's amazing. So, I mean, for those of you who don't know, 1-800-GOT-JUNK is they come and pick up your junk. I mean, that's essentially what the company does, right?
Yeah,
How the heck did you get on Oprah to talk about junk? Like, what did you talk about? Like, I need to understand and compute how you could get on, Dr. Phil 17 times. Is it the story behind it. Like, what were you talking about? I'm so fascinated by this.
So it's really understanding how every media outlet makes money. So every media outlet, whether it's Forbes magazine or Oprah or CNBC Squawk Box or a radio station or a blogger or a podcaster, they all make money off advertising. And the only way that they get advertising dollars is if they have really good content to attract viewers and listeners and readers to whatever their outlet is. So every outlet needs good stories and needs good content. And our job was to contact them and explain how our story could help their viewer or their listener or their reader. So with the Oprah story, as an example, we understood the Oprah audience, and Oprah was all about tugging on the heartstrings. She was all about the emotional pull into her story, right? She was all about, getting people to cry on the show or getting people to open up and be vulnerable. So we thought that we could probably help some pack rat, somebody who was overwhelmed with this junk and how it was harming their life and harming a relationship, etc. How if we could get rid of the junk, we could really open up their world for them.
I love that.
And so we kept contacting the Oprah show and getting nowhere. We phoned them, we sent them letters, we sent them emails, we sent them gifts, which you're not really allowed to do, but we sent them cheesy gifts or blue wigs and 1-800-GOT-JUNK jackets, stuff that they would never perceive as a bribe, and still didn't get in the door. And what happened was one morning, Oprah walked in with a USA Today article about 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And we'd been covered on about a half-page article in the USA Today in the money section. And she came in and she said, "Do you know these guys?" And the whole group, her team, started laughing, saying, "Do we know them? Like, they won't stop calling us." And she's like, "Well, let's do a show with them." And that was why her team opened up to do a show, was because we'd been written in the newspaper. Well, the newspaper, the USA Today, had heard about us because their writer read us in Fortune article. So we call it laddering up the media, that the more media coverage you get, the more media coverage you will continue to get. So you start by just getting any story. And by the way, we landed those 5,200 stories about our company prior to Facebook even launching. So there was nowhere to share it. We had no mass media outlets, no social media profiles to even share all the press we were getting. If we generated that today, we could have gone to the moon.
If you started over again today, would you still do that strategy?
Exactly the same strategy, but I would now look at every media article. And I talk about this in my book, Free PR. We actually give you the step-by-step instructions for any company to generate a lot of free press without using a PR firm. We demystify how it actually works. So I would take every story and think of it like a log, putting a log on a fire, right? Like if we land the Oprah story, it's just a log, and that log just sits there. And then you get Dr. Phil, that's another log. And then you get Forbes magazine, that's another. Well, now I got 3 logs just sitting there. They're not even on fire yet. The way that you light the logs on fire is you place them on your Facebook page, you place them on your LinkedIn page, you put them on your Twitter profile, you share it on Instagram. Maybe you share it with put it on your social or your press page of your website, so you get all the SEO link backs. Maybe you email it out to your list. But then if you really want to light the logs on fire, right, you've got them lit on fire. Now I want to put gas on the fire. I'm going to drive advertising traffic to it. So I'm going to boost those. I'm going to drive traffic to it. I'm going to share it on Facebook 5 times, share it on LinkedIn 5 times, share it on Twitter 5 times over the next 12 months. I'm going to ask my employees to share it. So it's how do you amplify that message and get more and more people to share it? Because the reality was, being on Oprah was good, but telling everybody we were on Oprah was better. And then buying advertising traffic towards it to tell people we were on Oprah is even better, right? So now if you multiply that over thousands of stories, it becomes massive.
I love that. And again, the reason I decided to do this with you is because a lot of people don't have the money to go spend a ton of cash on all sorts of ads and this types of thing. But once you have that kind of leverage, do you feel like when you got on those types of events, you got a boost in sales? What was it like for you? Every single time or not so much? What's the expectancy, I guess I would ask?
The expectancy that I try to teach people is don't expect a lot of revenue because you're in the press. But if you can now take the fact that you're in the press and amplify it on social media, drive people to your media page, retarget them because they've come to your website when they saw the article, it becomes part of your marketing and sales mix, right? You've got your direct sales, maybe you got your funnels, you've got your email sequences, like all your emails going out can have a PS, did you see us in Forbes magazine, right? All of that amplification becomes part of your marketing and sales mix. When you do that, then yes, you actually see credibility and you see an increase in sales. The reality is most of our customers, anybody listening, most of your customers will believe what they see in the newspaper or a magazine or a podcast or a radio interview that you're in more than they'll believe the advertising you put in front of them. So you get a lot more social proof, a lot more third-party credibility by being covered in the media, which then allows your marketing and your sales to really take off.
So you're saying that look at the outlets that you want to present to and actually get, like, don't be a pig and like reach out and just take my story, you know, and actually look at what they're interested in, what matters to them, and start developing a rapport. And the expectancy is the long run, bigger picture is what you're actually looking for the overall health of your business and your brand. And ultimately it will lead to sales.
Yeah, and you're not asking this media outlet to cover you. You're asking the media outlet if they would like some great content for their viewers or their listeners or their readers. Much like I started this, interview with you was I said, tell me a little bit more about your audience so I know how to give them my content in a way that'll help them the most. Because if I focus on helping them, then the amplification of that story will get even bigger. But if I focus about, hey, cover me, cover me, cover me, nobody really wants to just sit and talk about Cameron Herold or all that he's done. But if I can give you my lessons on how to help your audience, then we both win. And I think that's the key to remember with every media outlet is they need to write a new story every single day. The opportunity for you is to give them content that will help them so that they'll want to write your story. And then that story will lead to more stories. And then it's the amplification of those stories that will really help you grow your brand.
So you mentioned USA Today, you mentioned Forbes and different things. Did you pay for those outlets, or because some people do, right?
Yeah,
So
really,
I guess
really.
the assumption is that you have to pay in certain just curious.
No, really bad decision to pay for any media exposure because you're talking to the sales team, not the journalist. So what I do is I phone the journalist, I phone the podcaster, I phone the blogger, I phone the TV person who's actually doing the interview. And I say, hey, do you have 2 minutes? I think I have a good story for you. Because they'll cover me then. They're not going to charge me at that point. But no, you don't want to pay for that coverage. If you go to the CameronHerold.com, like if you go to my website or the COO Alliance website, and you look at the media or press pages on those websites, you're going to see hundreds and hundreds of media outlets that have covered me. Like I've been in the physical print edition of Forbes, the physical print edition of Fortune, the physical print edition of Inc., the print edition of American Airlines magazine have all covered me just because I've picked up the phone and said, hey, I have good content for your readers, right?
That's wonderful. So, so you're just reaching out and you're following up, and who's actually doing the interviews? Was it you? Was it the CEO? I mean, because some people freak out at the possibility of having to actually communicate with humans and then having it blast out into the world, right? I mean, it's a little bit bigger than, let's just give you some great content because you're actually out there. I mean, right? I mean, it's kind of scary for some people.
Well, in the early days of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, we picked up the phone and contacted the media directly, and then we pitched the media on story, and then we did the interview. Then we found that if we could get someone on our team to pitch them and say, hey, do you want me to get the COO on the phone right now? Or hey, do you want me to get the CEO on the phone right now? That even added more credibility that we had someone in-house that could get us on the call really quickly. So I loved hiring 23 to 26-year-olds who love to sell, who love to cold call, who love to pick up the phone and pitch, who were okay with handling rejection, and who could manage a bunch of leads. I also found that women were better than men because they could get through the gatekeeper faster, they could build a relationship better. Men were more apt to take a female's call than a men's call, and women were more apt to take a female's call than a men's call. So women just had a higher success rate of getting through the gatekeeper. And as long as they loved to do sales, then they were okay with the sales approach of calling journalists all day long, making 30 calls a day, getting through to 3 or 4, pitching them on the story, and then asking questions and listening.
So you think that women are better at this? If you're going to hire somebody, a woman might be a little bit better position.
Yeah, I found women doing sales, women doing direct sales, women selling PR are much better than men.
So the pitch, it's the hardest part. It's the thing that'll get the journalist to talk to you or not. And some, like, so in my world, we deal with consumer electronics. I mean, you know, all sorts of different types of products, right? We teach people how to get into chain stores, and the more media exposure, better branding overall. However, a lot of people can't compute, like, what could they say to a journalist to get them to even look at their story? I mean,
Right. So
you know,
here's
like
the
a baby
exact.
product, whatever it is, like, where do you squeeze out the ideas for a quick, you know?
Okay, you're going in two different questions. The first question is, what's the pitch to get them to listen to you?
Yeah.
And then the second one is, what are the angles that we can create a story around?
Okay.
So the first question is, this is what you pitch every journal. And never phone an editor, never phone the news desk. You phone the journalist or the blogger or the podcaster directly, and you say, hey, do you have 2 minutes? I think I have a good story for you. That's it. And if they say yes, you give them the 2 minute pitch, and which is the angles, and then you say, what do you think? If they say no, I'm really busy, then say, how about I call you tomorrow or Friday? But you don't tell them the story, and you don't email them the story. All you're saying is, do you have 2 minutes? I think I have a good story, to get them on the phone to engage with you. The key is to get them to engage, right? It's kind of like to say to the pretty girl or the good looking guy, you know, can we go for a coffee? Like, coffee is the one step towards dinner, which is the one step to the bedroom. You don't go, hey, you're cute, can we go have sex? Like, it just doesn't work. So don't pitch them on the story until you know you've got interest to hear about the story. So then the second question is, what are the angles that we have? So for everyone listening, I'll give you some specific angles that work for everyone listening. The first one is the CEO story, and it's how they started the company. You know, they left their shitty job and they started the brand, or they had a bad experience with some product or service and they wanted to fix it, so they started their company, or they saw an opportunity or a gap in the market, or they listened to customers and they started their story. So it's, how did you start your story? Mm-hmm. The second story that everyone listening has is the overcoming adversity, or the lesson from the edge, right? It's how you almost went bankrupt, how you overcame a crisis, how you dealt with the scariness of almost going bankrupt or whatever, right? And there's a story in that inspires and connects people with your brand and your product. The third one that we all have is our leveraging technology story. It's how are we harnessing technology, apps, automation, sales funnels to grow our business and grow our brand so that we can grow without the people side of the business. And there's always a story in around the technology. And then the last one that I love is the story about your customer. And it's how your product or your service helped your customer. It's how it helped their dog, live longer, or it helped their kids be happier, or it helped their relationship with their spouse because you were taking these supplements and you both felt better in the morning, whatever. But it's that customer-centric story. And if you get a story about your customer in Chicago loving your product, you can get a very similar story about a different customer in Dallas and a different customer in San Francisco and a different customer in Miami. It's the same shit, different day, right? So I have an example. I coach CEOs and COOs all over the world, typically, real companies in the $5 to $500 million range. So I could call every media outlet in Tampa and talk about how I coach Bobby Harris from Blue Grace Logistics and how they raised $255 million in Tampa and how they're blah, blah, blah. And then once I'm done calling every media outlet in Tampa about Bobby, I would move and I would call every media outlet in San Diego of how I helped Organifi and how did I help May with Organifi grow their brand. And then I could go and contact everybody in San Francisco about how I did 15.5. And do you follow? So that's what everybody listening can do, is those 4 stories.
So that requires the customer to get interviewed as well, because you probably need the customer to correspond in some way.
More often than not, the journalists are a little bit lazy and they're happy with the shortcut. So if you can give them the soundbite on how your product or service helped the customer, and maybe it's a quick video from the customer or a quick testimonial, that's all they need. You can fill in the blanks and they'll make the story about the customers being happy. Like, I can talk about how Bobby benefited, how Bobby loved all this. Here's a quote from Bobby, how Bobby won all these awards. They'll make the story about Bobby, but I'll give them all those sound bites.
But Bobby has to say that's okay that you do that.
More often than not, your customers are thrilled when they get press anyway. It's like, hey, Bobby, I just got this article about how great you are. He's like, whoa, thanks for making me look great.
Really? So they're okay with it without you even letting them know about you?
I'm not necessarily going to disclose his revenues or any of his mistakes, but if I talk about how great he's grown because of my coaching, he's like, yeah, I said you were great as a coach. Thanks for the exposure.
Awesome. That's a really good idea. So you have a baby product, for instance, and it's, I don't know, the newest version of a bib. Give me some ideas of what you could say. So you're just like, I started this because I had a baby, my baby was dribbling. That's what you're talking about? Or I know you gave
Yeah,
for examples, but I just want to, you're so good at it and so
I'll give
quick.
you I'll give you the 4 story angles about the new baby bib.
Okay.
I hated my job in IT. I hated working for the man. I hated the 9 to 5. And I was at a cocktail party and somebody was talking about their kids spilling shit all over their clothing. And I thought I could start a product around that. So I started a company.